All right, so away we go. So we are going to camp out in chapter 2 for a while now. You can see we got the mean, variance, standard deviation, and z-scores. We're going to go through all of those, but we're going to be starting with the mean, or as we saw last time, measures of central tendency. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a mean, median, and mode quick recap. And then the rest of the day is going to be dedicated to in-class practice, where I'll show you the functions and some of the shortcuts and some of the pitfalls that you need to be aware of when calculating these in Excel. And then after that, we'll have time for extra practice, and I'll just remind you about your homework assignment coming up. So as you recall from the lecture from Toronto, if you wanted to give somebody who needed to make a decision information, they usually don't want to hear all your data. You want a single number that will describe, in general, the data that you have. So, for example, if the governor of Indiana wanted to adjust their budget to make sure that they have funding for students to go to college, he would want to know how much money does the typical student have access to, and he wouldn't want a list of 20,000 numbers that you might have in a survey. He just wants one number that'll give him the general idea so he can make that decision. And as we saw, that one number is a measure of central tendency. It's a single score that is representative of your entire distribution. So whether you have 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 scores, you try to boil it down to one single score that's typical of the entire group, a single score that's representative of the entire group, basically a single score that gives you an idea of what that entire group is like. So the one that is used by far the most by psychologists, as we saw, was the mean. So the mean is the typical average that you've been calculating since probably high school. So it's where you take all your scores, add them all up, divide by the number of scores that you have. It's thought of as the balance point for the scores, because if you physically cut this distribution here out of wood, for example, right here would be where you could balance it on your finger, so it's the same weight on either side. So the mean takes into account the size of the scores. It also takes into account how many are on one side and the distance from that mean. It uses the most information. That's usually why it's most useful. And you can see that it's extremely important because not only does it have a symbol, but the symbol is different for a sample and a population. So for a sample mean, it's the capital M. For a population mean, we use the symbol mu. The next most common measure of central tendency is the median. And the median doesn't care about the size of numbers, doesn't care about the size of the scores. All it cares about is that the same number of scores are on the left as on the right. So the median just cuts your distribution in half so that 50% of the scores are on one side and 50% of the scores are on the other side. So it doesn't matter what the actual sizes of the scores are. You choose the score where if you look to the right, you have 10,000 scores. If you look to the left, you also have 10,000 scores. That's the median, and that's the second most popular measure of central tendency in psychology. The last one that is used in psychology, not as much as the other two, is the mode. And the mode is just the score that has the greatest frequency. So it's just the most popular score, right? The most fashionable score. So it's the one that has the highest frequency. So in this case, the mode is usually easy to visually see, because if you have a frequency distribution graph, the mode is the value that is at the highest peak. So in this case, the highest peak is right here, right about, looks like $15,000 of funding per year. And as we saw, we have these three different measures because based on the distribution, sometimes the mean will give you the best representative score. Sometimes the median will give you that representative score. Sometimes the mode would give you that representative score. And the mean is definitely the one that is most vulnerable to outliers. It's the least robust is the name that they call it. And then the median and the mode are more highly robust to outliers. And we saw this when we looked at what would happen if Elon Musk visited Indiana and was very impressed with all of the high school students here and said, when they graduate, I'm going to be giving them $60,000 a year for their college scholarship. So what would happen to our distribution when all these new students enter that, that college system? Well, with those new students entering the college system, so this is the non-funded before Elon Musk's philanthropy students. These are the highly funded students right now. Before they were around, that would be your mean, that would be your balance point. But once they get added, it's like adding a weight on another side of the scale, and you got to move over here to redistribute that weight. And you can see that right now, if you were to report this number to the governor, he would think to himself, wow, most students in Indiana University, they're averaging, $28,000 a year. I guess I don't have to fund anything. That's enough. Whereas it's not representative because look, by far, the majority of students are in that lower funded area. And again, this occurs just because of these outliers, these scores that are very extreme. On the other hand, those new scores would move the median very little because while they're being highly, highly funded, there's not that many that are being funded at this time. So the median, as you can see, original median, new median, wouldn't move very much at all. And the mode, to remind you, wouldn't move at all because unless more students start getting funded at this level than are funded at this level, unless their frequency goes above, the mode is not going to move at all. So you can see that the mean is very susceptible to outliers, the median and the mode less so. All right, so what we're going to do right now is we are going to do some in-class practice. So the file that you're looking for is 05 practice. That's the September 4th one, not the extra practice. Open up the one that says practice. And while everybody is accessing that, I am going to stop part 1 of today's recording. So this time we are going to have the Excel being shown and recorded. So lesson learned. All right, so first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to zoom on this little section here so we can see exactly what we're doing. And hopefully everybody has this one open. All right, so there we go. All right, so what we have here is we're going to start off on that part over there to the left. We got 3 sets of scores once again. So we have the X scores, and then we have the Y scores, and then we have the Z scores over here. So the X scores, again, you can think of, we had 12 subjects. We measured them on their emotional intelligence. We had 12 subjects. We measured them on their musical ability. And then we had 12 subjects, and we measured them on their artistic ability. So let's say that those were the scores that we had for each of those 12 subjects. And what we want to do now is we want to know what is the mean, the median, and the mode for the X scores. What's the mean, the median, and the mode for the Y scores? And then lastly, what is all that for the Z scores? All right, so we go down here, and we're going to start off with the mean. Once again, sample mean for this. So I'm going to show you the calculations for the samples. Those are by far the ones that are used most often. I'm also going to mention the calculations for the population, where they differ. So away we go. So calculating the sample mean, we put in equals, let Excel know that we're going to be dealing with a formula. The formula is average, and this works for samples as well as populations. Actually, for all 3 of these, it works for samples and populations. That distinction is going to come up when we do standard deviations and variance. So the formula is average. You open it up with the parentheses, let Excel know that numbers are coming. Highlight the numbers that you want to calculate the average for. Close those parentheses, hit equals, and we got 43.17. We got the answer cells up here. Got to pop that up there. Do not use manual because in a situation like this, 43.17, you'll notice that Excel told you it was 43.17. I typed in 43.17, but that's wrong. It's wrong because it's not 43.17. It's actually 43.17, 166666667. And actually it's 166, all the way down. So we definitely do not want to add in that much rounding error the first time that we do something if the median is the mean is the first thing we're calculating. So do not do that. Do not write manually. Use that equals function. Carry all those decimal places over. Let's make our stats exact, because again, as psychologists, we need it to be as close to exact as possible because it's so important for people's lives. All right, let's try it again for y. So once again, equals average, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close those parentheses, we hit enter, we got the average for y, higher average than for the x scores. We pop that in using the equals function, and we get that one correct as well. So for this z one, I'm going to show you an error that I almost guarantee you're going to make. I make it about once every 2 weeks on average, and literally it's what I just said, average. So you'll notice that the function for this is average, but we call it the mean. That's going to mess you up at one point, and you're going to be sitting there going, oh, we're calculating the mean. Let me do this, equals mean, open parentheses. I'm going to highlight those z-scores, close parentheses. Here we go. And Excel is going to say hashtag name. You know what's going on here? So don't panic when you see that. All that means is that Excel does not recognize the name that you gave it, right? You gave it a function, and Excel is basically saying, I have never heard of this function before. So when that happens, if you're doing your homework, if you're doing an exam, just say to yourself, oh, man, what happened here? Let me see. You go in there. Sometimes it's misspelled, but for me, I will put average, 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 but because I'm thinking mean, every once in a while I'll write out mean. So you realize, oh no, I wrote out the mean. So you can just kind of click into that editing bar up there, or just delete the whole thing. Either way you do it, get average in there, hit enter, Excel's fine, and then we're going to pop that up into our answer cell, and we have the mean for the z-scores done as well. All right, has everybody got those three means? Okay, so next we got the medians. Median is actually super friendly. The formula for median is median, easily enough. And misspelled median, I was about to get that thing again. So median is the formula for median. So once again, equals median, open parentheses, highlight those cells, close the parentheses, hit enter, and we find a median of 44 for x. We'll do that again for y, equals median, open parentheses, highlight those cells, close the parentheses, we got the median for y. Notice the median for y way lower than the mean for y. And then finally equals median, open parentheses, highlight those scores for the z-score, close those parentheses, and we get a median of 41. Popping those into our answer cells using the equals function. And I'll show you that move in just a little bit. And we have those ones correct as well. Everybody got those three medians? Okay, last one we want to do is we want to do the mode. And actually, before we get to there, hopefully, if you've seen the previous lecture, you were thinking about what's going on with male and female wages. So if you remember on one of those last slides, I mentioned that some of the data is indicating that females do not make as much as males. Specifically, females without children do not make as much as males without children. And then there was another set of data that said that males without children are actually making less than females without children. And I mentioned that one of the things that might be going on is that one set of that data was calculated using the mean, and the other set of data was calculated using a median. And this is a nice example right here, where if you calculate the mean, all of a sudden you got 50, but you calculate the median, and all of a sudden it's 25.5. So this is one of the reasons why, if you continue on in grad school, you'll get into more look at the distribution, look at the tests that tell you how weird and wonky the distribution is, but you should definitely be aware that these measures of central tendency, sometimes with like the y-scores, highly different. Other times, like we see here with the x-scores, almost exactly the same. So that also gives you information that of what type of distribution you're dealing with, and we'll see more of that as we go on in this course. All right, last one, mode. Mode is also very friendly. The function for mode is mode. So you can see here we got mode.multi, we got mode.single. That's in case you have an array or a distribution with multiple peaks. We use the multi. Here, that's a little bit advanced for this course. Here, we're just going to use the single version. And this one that's simple down here, which is just mode, will work in any previous version of Excel. So if you get hired in a company and they haven't updated their Excel yet, what you learn in here will still work there. So we're just going to use mode, open parentheses, highlight those cells, close your parentheses, and we get a mode of 15. Notice the mode is nowhere near the mean or the median. For the y-scores, mode, highlight those scores, close your parentheses. We have a mode of 22 for the y-scores, and then finally for the z-scores, highlight those, type in mode, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close those parentheses, and we get a mode of 104. The mode, when you don't have a lot of data, like we only have 12 scores here for each X, Y, and Z. When you have such little data, the mode is very sensitive to changes in your data, because the mode for those Z scores, that 104, comes from the fact that there's 2 scores that are 104, which means that if the very next person scores 263, that's going to be our new mode. So the mode, when you're at low numbers, is very, very susceptible to change. But that's what we have right here for the mode. So once again, pop those into our answer cells. And we have those all correct. So does everybody have 100% on that first little part 1 demo? Okay. So for the next part here, what I wanted to do is I wanted to just go through a demonstration to show you how susceptible some of these measures are to outliers. So I'm going to bring these original scores back. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same calculations, but now we're adding in one extra subject who just demolished every single test that they gave them and scored 1,000, right? So it's got 1,000 on emotional IQ. It's got 1,000 on artistic ability. It's got 1,000 on musical ability. So what's going to happen to the mean, the median, and the mode if you include those outliers? So if you want to work ahead, I'm just going to do this very quickly one more time. For the mean equals average, highlight those scores, now including the score of 1,000. We hit enter, and we can see that the mean for the X scores has more than doubled. So we have one person coming in there with exceptionally high scores, and all of a sudden the mean for our other 12 scores included now has more than doubled. For Y, we have equals average, open parentheses, highlight those scores including the 1,000, close those parentheses, and we see that Y has, the mean for Y has more than doubled. And then finally, for the Z scores equals average, open those parentheses, highlight those scores, close it up, and also the Z scores have just about doubled, more than doubled actually as well. All right, so we add one score of 1,000, and all of a sudden the mean for every single set of our scores, X scores, Y scores, and Z scores, has more than doubled, completely moving where our balance point for the mean was. But what about the median? Well, for the X scores, we have to calculate that new median, highlight all the scores, including that score of 1,000, and we see that the median has moved, but not as much. It's gone from 44 to 53. So yes, the median moves, but because the median just cares about how many numbers are on one side and how many numbers are on the other side, that score of 1,000 just added one number to the other side. So all the median has to do is just move a little bit, so it's got the same number of scores on each side. So you can see it had to move from 44 to 53, not that big of a move. The median for the y-scores equals median, open parentheses, highlight all of them. We got 1,000. Has gone from 25.5 to 27. So once again, barely moved the needle on that one. And then finally, median for the z-scores, for the score, for all of them now, including 1,000. And we see that the median for z-scores has gone from 41 to 44. So if you wanted an accurate description or an accurate or a representative score for this new distribution, and we put those into the answer cells, but if you wanted a representative score for this new distribution that has this new subject that just blew the lid off of every single test that you gave them, now would be the time to maybe think, maybe the mean is not such a good idea because we have this one outlier that is just massively influencing the scores. Maybe instead, let's use the median. That's going to give a truer version of where that center of the distribution is, where that representative score is. And then finally, the mode, I mentioned that it was the most robust. And the mode in this case should not change at all because of this new score of 1,000, because it's the only score at 1,000. So it's not going to move the mode. So equals mode, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close the parentheses. It's not going to move the mode at all. And the mode in that case is extremely robust. So this is one of the reasons why it's always a good idea to look at your data, look at your distributions, because Excel and later on SPSS will be more than happy to calculate the average, the mean for you. But sometimes the mean is not the one to use, especially if there's outliers in your data. So oftentimes for data that can have outliers, you'll see the median reported. So oftentimes they'll talk about an area and they'll talk about the median price for a home in that area, because they wanted the average homeowner to know, okay, how much do I need to spend to live in this area? And they want to factor out all the people that built mansions, and spent millions of dollars on their homes from influencing the average calculation, the mean calculation. So they'll use the median. You'll also hear about median income, because a lot of times CEOs in a company will skew the results incredibly because they have those massive, massive salaries. So again, oftentimes the median is used, especially when you have those outliers. All right, so does everybody have this? Everybody got 100%? Everybody knows the formula so far? It's all good? All right. Okay, so up until now, we've been doing a lot of kind of repetition practice. You've had to type in these formulas over and over and over and over again to basically do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And while that's great to give Excel some of the heavy lifting, we want to give it even more of the tedious kind of heavy lifting. And typing in those formulas over and over again to do the same thing over and over again gets about as tedious as saying over and over again. So let's take a look at some shortcuts that we can use to cut down on the work that we need to do. And we're going to take a look now at copying and pasting functions and how you can use that to speed up your calculations. So we're going to do the X scores first, and we're going to sit there and we're going to say, all right, we want the mean for these new X scores, right? We have these new scores here. We want the mean. So we're going to go back in here, equals average, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close your parentheses. We got a mean of 12. Pop that up into our answer cell. Yay, we got that correct. And then we go to the Y scores here, and we're like, well, we just want to do the same thing, right? We just calculated the mean for X. I want to do the same thing for Y. Oh, if there was only some way. Well, hang on to your hats. Here we go. So what you can do whenever you're dealing with a formula is you can copy the cell that formula is in and then move it to the new location and paste it. And Excel will recalculate that formula with the new numbers. So for example, we have the mean for X right here. We can copy that, However you like to copy it. I like Control C. I like to use the keyboard shortcuts. You can also right click on it, I think, and go to copy. You can also go to this little area up here and use the copy and paste little buttons, whatever you like to do. I like the shortcuts. So I'm going to move that to a new cell, and I'm going to tell Excel, Control V, why don't you paste that formula in there, and lo and behold, it calculated the mean for the y-scores. And I can even do that with any function. So I told Excel to make that cell, that answer cell, equal to this answer cell down here. So now I can tell it to do the same thing. I'll copy and paste it, move it over, and I have it immediately done in there. So rather than continuing to type things in over and over and over again, if you do it once and then you know you just want to move it and continue to do the same function, you can go down, again, copy that. Control C is the one I like to use. Move it to the cell that you want that new formula in. Hit Control V. And even for the answer cells, we pop it up here. And you can see that it's recalculating those for the mean in this case. So the way that it kind of works, just to give you a schematic of this, so look at those equal signs there. So when you have, you know, your three answer cells right there, and you tell Excel to make that cell equal to this cell down here, right? This is the cell that you have your answer in. What Excel is doing when you tell it to make it equal to that cell is it's saying, all right, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells over. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells down. This is just a schematic, but anyways, 7 cells down. And that's what's going in here. Whatever is 7 cells over and 7 cells down is going in here. So when you copy and paste this into the new cell, this new cell says, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go 7 cells over, right? So it'll end up here. And then I'm going to go 7 cells down, and it'll end up right beside it. And that's where you have your mean for your y-scores. So Excel will always move the formula, and whatever the formula is accessing, the same number of steps that you pasted or that you moved the cells. So for example, for the median here, I can put in equals median, and I'm telling Excel, look above you and access those cells for this formula. I'm closing that parentheses, and I want Excel to look above it and access those cells for this formula. I want it to look above it and access those cells for this formula. So I can copy and paste, and then you can even do more than one at a time, because I told Excel to go across a certain number of columns and down a certain number of rows to get to 12, 32, and 50. And if I copy that and move it 1 cell down, it's going to go 1 cell down and pick up to 12, 33, and 50. So I can just copy those answer cells wholesale. Whoops. I can just do that. There we go. Copy and paste those. And then you can see that I got those correct, and it's accessing the right cells. So one thing that you can do before you, as you're learning your copy and paste, it's not a bad idea to occasionally double click on the function that you copied and pasted and just make sure that it's accessing what you want it to access. So for example, we go to the z-score. I'm really hoping that equals is picking up that answer. Just a little double click, and Excel will show you the cells that it's accessing for your functions. So you can use this to really increase the speed of the calculations that you do. So again, for example, the mode equals mode, open parentheses, highlight those X scores, close those parentheses. We get a mode of 12. Notice that the mean, the median, and the mode are all the same for the X scores. That indicates a symmetrical distribution. Copy and paste those for the Y scores and the Z scores to get their modes. Copy and paste these answer cells to fill in the, to access these and fill in the answer cells. And you can see that we have all of those correct. So as you get more and more familiar with this, you'll find more and more shortcuts. So for example, if I just had the one there for the one answer cell there for Excel, it's really easy. Just kind of really quickly fill it all in once you get a little bit of practice with it. So I highly recommend for your homework, for upcoming pre-test or post-test, literally for any other time that you have to calculate a mean, median, or mode in this class, and maybe even beyond this class, try to use the formulas as much as you can. So have your Excel sheets open when you're doing your homework, and if they say, what's the mean of these three scores, 4, 5, and 6? It's 5. You can do that in your head, but pop it into Excel, get that extra practice, and also practice the cutting and paste, practice the moving of the formulas around, because it takes a little bit of practice at the beginning, and you might be slower at the beginning. You'll be way faster once you learn these skills. It won't take you too long, but you might have to put in that practice in order to get that kind of fluid skills in order to fully take advantage of it. All right, so we've done that. So I'm going to do this next question here, and what we're going to do is I'm going to first show you what not to do, and then I'm going to show you what to do. So do not follow along for this first little bit, and then follow along when I tell you that we're about to do things the right way. Okay, so we just learned copy and paste. And let's say that I'm sitting here and I have this new set of data, and I'm like, all right, mean, median, and mode for all three sets of scores. Here we go. I just learned copy and paste. So that equals average. And we got those X scores there. And that equals median. And we got those X scores there. And that equals mode. And we got those. And we got those X scores there. And I want to do the exact same thing for the Y scores and the Z scores. So we'll just copy and paste, exact same thing. And then I'm going to put in my equals for my X scores, copy and paste all the way down. All right, we got those correct. And because I want to do the exact same thing for Ys, oh my gosh, what happened? All right, so copy and paste. You can do things very quickly, but there's one pitfall to them, and that's that you have to make sure that what you're doing is actually what you're asking Excel to do. It's actually what you're telling Excel to do. So what we have here is we have what we want Excel to do and what Excel has been told to do. And Excel will always do what it's been told to do. So in order to figure out why are we getting the Y scores wrong, what's this hashtag NA over here that for the Z scores that they're giving us? And it all boils down to we did not remember this when we were copying and pasting. So what Excel is doing here when we double click on the X scores, the mean for the X scores, we told it to calculate the average. It's calculating the average. And we told it to start looking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Start 7 rows up. And then continue all the way up to this row 8. So we literally told it, start from row 8 and go all the way down to row 19. That's where your data is. Calculate the average. And it did, and that's correct for the scores for X. However, when we copied and pasted that, Excel said, all right, I'm going to do that exact same thing. I'll just move it over one column because that's what you told me. You copied it, you moved it over one column. So it's going to do the exact same thing. And it did, and the reason we got that mean incorrect is because we were missing these two scores here on the Y set of data. So we got to be very careful when we're copying and pasting. In this case, we just need to plan ahead a little bit to make sure that our formulas are actually calculating what we want them to calculate. So we got the mean for Y incorrect because of that. We got the mean for Z incorrect. In fact, that's even worse because we missed 4 pieces of data when we copied and pasted. Again, because we said, hey, in this column, this column, do the same thing we did in this column, and Excel is saying, all right, I went up to row 19. I got 4 more pieces of data, but you wanted up to row 19. So this is one of the reasons why I say, as you're getting familiar with the use of copy and paste, always a good idea to just kind of give it a quick little double click. Make sure that the data that you want being accessed is being accessed. As you become more familiar with this, you won't need to do that quite as often, but in the early going, literally half a second, double click, just to double check and be like, oh, wait, I missed some numbers here. We have to redo this. All right, so you can follow along now. We'll do it the correct way. And really all you need to do in this case, well, there's a number of different ways to do it, but if you want to use the copy and paste, you just kind of have to plan ahead and think of a situation that would work for everyone. So one of the nice things about Excel's functions is that if your cells are blank, unless it's specifically looking for blank cells, it'll ignore those cells. So the mean, the median, and the mode will ignore any blank cells. You don't have to worry about cells that do not have numbers in it. So if I was doing this, I would say, you know, one way to get it so that I'm doing the same thing for every set of data, and it works for every set of data, is to start with the longest one, which is the z-scores, and say, all right, I'm going to calculate, I'm doing it again, I'm going to calculate the average, not the mean. I'm calculating the mean. The formula is equals average. And this time I'm going to highlight all of the z-scores. And I'm going to close those parentheses. And now when I copy that and paste it for the y-scores, I'm moving it over one column. I double click on it. And Excel is getting all the data that I wanted to get, 2 blank columns that I don't have to worry about. And we now have that y, the mean for the y correctly calculated. We can do the same thing for the z-score, for the x-scores. Once again, just a little double click. We got all the data that we want in there. 4 blank cells, no big deal, doesn't change the calculation at all. So when you're copying and pasting, make sure that you're planning ahead, thinking about what is a situation that will work for everybody. And once you figure it out, in this case, start off with the z-scores when you're calculating the mean, the median, and the mode. Once you figure them out, you can use that copy and paste function to very quickly complete your calculations. But again, until you're really practiced with this, just give it a double click and take a look and say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Let me just double check the mode. There it is. And did I do my answer cells correctly? Yep, that's the one I wanted. So again, just give it a little double click, and that'll really ensure that you catch any mistakes that you might make as you're learning this. All right, so that is all that I wanted to cover for today. So just a couple of announcements, and then we're going to turn this over to just kind of practice time for the rest of the session here. So again, there's some extra practice questions in this one that we were just working on. Highly recommend. Try the copy and paste. It'll massively speed up your efficiency at doing this. That's just a good skill to have. It'll come in very handy during the exam, because while you can finish the exam by typing in median, mode, and mean, average every single time you need to, how much nicer is it going to be to have the time to kind of sit back, look at the question and go, I wonder what I should do, rather than being, oh, I got to type this as fast as I can, no time to stop and think. So do yourself a favor, get quick with those skills so you have that extra time to think. There's another extra practice Excel sheet that's more of the same. And again, it's just this idea of repetition so that you can get it quick, 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 and automatic, automatic, automatic. You have some feedback on your pretests at this point. If you're not getting 100% on your pretest, you can still make up those points. Do the Quiz Me option. It'll let you know when you're 100% completed on the Quiz Me options. That's the score I'm going to use, the maximum of either the Quiz Me or the pretest. Keep up to date with the homework. You are now ready to go on homework assignment 3, chapter 2, part 1. It's going to ask you to calculate means, medians, and modes. Do it in Excel. Again, at this point, it might actually be quicker for you to pull out your calculator and just do it by hand. I highly recommend against that, use the Excel program, get some practice with that, copy and paste when you can, and remember that that is due by midnight tomorrow so that you're ready for our next class. All right, so that was all the new stuff that I wanted to cover today. So the rest of this class is dedicated to practice time. So again, you have this Excel sheet. We got a few more examples on that. There's a second Excel sheet. You got a few examples on that. If you want to start off on your homework, feel free to do that as well. If you want to go back and visit previous Excel sheets, maybe the order of operations, if you're still working on that, absolutely. If you have any issues or you're running into trouble, call me over. We'll make sure that everybody's getting this down and good to go. But if you've had a rough day, want to call it early, if you're all statsed out, as I like to say, feel free. But otherwise, do some practice. We got, what do we got? Half an hour still left. So nice chunk. And again, try out some stuff. Call me over if you run into trouble. And we'll keep sanding the floor and waxing on and waxing off.